Welcome back to Youth Perspective. I'm Ada, your host, and today we are joined in the studio by the trailblazing musician Ainsley Johns. You've definitely seen him about the BUC and beyond, performing, MDing, and so much more. But before we delve into the story, I just want to invite you to and Ainsley as we bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for this opportunity to speak, Lord, to speak about purpose, speak about music. I want to pray that you guide this interview and that it's a blessing and a great help to those who listen. Lord, thank you again for the opportunity, and please guide my words and guide the interview. Amen. So, Ainsley, if you could share just a little bit about your background and your journey to where you are today, both musically and also just in general.
Yeah. So as you said, my name's Ainsley Johns. I'm a musician. I dare say a multi-instrumentalist. I mainly gig keys and I play keys, well, mainly keyboards, but I actually started off on the drums and then moved to keys and then started to play bass and a little bit of guitar here and there as well. But my roots are founded in Nottingham. My home church is Nottingham Central, which is in the NEC. And for those of you who don't know Nottingham Central, there's sort of like a fountain of music that is flowing from that place with mentors such as people like David Francis Sr., Eddie Francis, Richard Christie, Trevor Watts, my dad, Lavon Johns, my uncle, Christopher Harris. There's many names I'm probably forgetting, and if they hear this, they'll probably charge it to me. But with that grounding and that sort of foundation, it sort of set me on my way to being a musician professionally as well as within the church. It also spurred me to go and do music in higher education as well. So I went to Leeds Conservatoire, what's now called Conservatoire. It was called formerly Leeds College of Music, where I did my BA in popular and jazz studies, and I got first, top marks. And I also stayed on to do my masters as well. And shortly after, I was blessed enough, because something I really wanted to do was actually be a lecturer in music. I have a real passion. It's not had. I really do have a real big passion to share the gift that God has given me, and also try and cultivate the gift that God has given others as well. Because I know I was very blessed to be in an environment of Nottingham Central where there was more or less mentors everywhere I look. But not every church has that. Not every church has somebody that's willing to sit down and show them this. Sometimes people don't even have the knowledge. I was really blessed that not only did they have the ear, but they also, people could read, and had that form of training as well. So I'm really blessed to have that. So I'm really, really passionate about sharing that with others as well. And working with young musicians, even like yourself. I'm not saying I'm responsible for anybody, but I'm just really grateful to that there's a community within the entire UK Adventist movement of musicians that are sort of returning their gift back to God, which is amazing. So yeah, I actually lecture at the Leeds Conservatoire. So that's been a blessing because, as I said, it was a dream of mine, and even see Adventists come through, and also teach them even within a formal setting like that. I'm also a producer. I've been blessed enough to produce for Netflix and different brands such as what's KFC and Specsavers, and I do most of that stuff actually working with a choir called the Big Gospel Choir as well, which is led by actually another Adventist called Gail Windress. So I work closely with her, working with brands and different other things as well. Um, and working on stuff. I don't know when you want me to stop, but I'm going to keep going if you don't mind. So I do a lot of that sort of stuff. And as Adele already said, you'll see me, fortunately and gratefully, I don't take this lightly, but I MD'd BUC Youth Day last year, 2023. And it wasn't on my own, it was with my cousin, my brother, in fact, Dwight Johns. And it's crazy that once again, it's sort of like you and Shona, it's just crazy to have two musicians in the family. So I'm really grateful that I'm able to share that with my brother. And also we had Fiona Donkor as well, who's one of the best praise and worship minds and leaders in the country, in my opinion. So you would have seen me on stuff like that, and also the NEC Youth Day that happened not too long ago as well. Yeah, there's so many things I could say that I've done, been abroad, playing for this artist, that artist. I've been blessed, and the Lord has really blessed my ministry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. A very wide kind of plethora of opportunities from your background. I mean, the verse that I was thinking about when I was thinking about what to ask you was First Peter 4:10, which basically says, each one has received a gift. Use it in service to one another as good stewards of God's varied grace.
Mm.
So I want to ask, because you mentioned quite correctly and rightly so that music has always been an integral part of our church. And so I was wondering, was there a moment for you when you realized that music ministry was a gift that God had given you?
Um, it was pretty much straight away. Um, my dad has been in the engine room of me being at the keyboard or being involved in ministry one way or another. But I, I actually did sermons when I was younger as well. Yeah, nobody would need to know that either. I don't know. There wasn't phones at this time, by the way, so no one can ask for a recording. There was nothing. So, and I've never seen it before, so I'm very grateful for that. But I'll tell you a quick story. Maybe this might help. So I started playing the piano around 7, I think, around 7 years old. But from 0 to 7, I was playing drums. In my head, I was a drummer, and I really liked to play drums in church. Even past 7, I was in my head, I'm a drummer. But when I got to 7 years old, I would use Friday nights after Vespers, after worship, I would sit down and I'll play the piano, or I'd play key drums actually, because my parents didn't really like drums in the house. And obviously at late night after, it's dark outside, I couldn't be playing drums. So what I did, I taught myself how to play the drums on the keyboard because it's a bit quieter. It can be, volume can go down. So I would used to play to various concerts, such as the Kurt Franklin Rebirth album, Byron Cage, the one with like Magnify and stuff like that. I think this it's not the Invitation, it's the one after that. Fred Hammond. There's a list of stuff. So I used to like really practice, or commissioned as well. That was a big one. Commission reunion. So I used to play key drums to all of that stuff religiously, I would have to say. And there was one night, it gets to, for those of you who know the Rebirth album, or the concert lineup, it goes Don't Cry. And then after that, there's a song called Always. And that song is in C major. And basically it's very diatonic. Diatonic means that it follows the keys. It's successive in the key most of the time. Okay, so if it's C, dun, that's C. Oh, that's a bit flat. Dun, da, 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 da. Right, that's diatonic. Right, that's when something moves in diatonic motion. Right, so that's literally how the song goes. It moves in diatonic motion. So I saw shapes on the piano at a young age. Basically, when I was playing it, and I remember my mum ran downstairs because she could hear that it wasn't the recording. And she was shocked. She was like, "How have you done that? Like, who's taught you that?" Bear in mind, there wasn't really YouTube at this time. This is probably like 2001, 2000 probably. So I was literally just listening and playing back what I heard. It wasn't perfect, but you could hear that I was playing something, and I was shocked myself. I didn't know what was going on. But but from there, my dad is a preacher. My dad does preach as an elder as well. And basically, anywhere I went, I either played piano or I played the drums. Key drums, by the way. So I didn't bring in a drum set or anything like that. I literally went to different churches playing, playing, um, playing key drums, even though there was no piano at all. I'll still be playing key drums along to stuff. So how did I come to sort of seeing the seriousness and the purpose of music ministry was actually through my parents ministering themselves, but also making sure that I had a place in their ministry also. And then literally as time went on, I continued to take my lessons, which is something that my grandma Harris really encouraged me to do, is take lessons and take it seriously. Now, that side of stuff, I think it really informed the church side of stuff, but I'm sure that's a question maybe you're going to ask later. But once again, it's that it was just the studying behind it that helped me to basically go and make sure that I have a job to do. When my dad goes to do something, I need to make sure I'm ready. And it was that sort of, I've got a deadline to meet each week. And that was to minister at the church, either with my dad or back at my home church, where there was people sort of with notepads. Oh, was Ainsley done this week? Okay. Okay. So yeah, that's when I started to maybe take it a bit more, firstly, take it seriously. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I was even gonna just follow up because you started mentioning terms like diatonic, and I guess in a way that was your first arrangement of a song. So this is I mean, that personally as a musician always intrigues me because I'm not a pianist officially.
Mhm.
And so and so I was gonna ask you what your process is like arranging a song. If someone gives you a song, are there particular things you look out for? Are there particular chords on the piano you like to use?
I think that's a hard question because in the professional realm, you can't just do what you want. You have to serve the song. You have to show respect to the song, and you also have to have once again the knowledge. And I keep saying this because one of my favorite texts is actually Second Timothy 2 verse 15, which says, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth." And it was actually one of my grandfather's favorite texts, and it was literally just make sure that you know what you're talking about. So when it comes down to things, you know what you're doing, and you can also once again make sure it's the best it can be. And my grandmother always said, "Do your best." So when it comes down to arranging and stuff like that, I make sure I listen to whatever the person's given to me. I make sure I respect it. I listen out for key things, maybe things in the top line. Top line is the melody, um, or certain instrumentation. And the thing is, I might feel it in a certain way, and I'm happy to embellish that, but it depends on the brief I've been given. But when it comes to church and stuff like that, um, I make sure I understand what it means in the how do I say this? What it means in the moment of either worship or meditation or something like that. I can't just if I went to the piano now, I can't just let's say I don't know. You won't hear me sing, but if I just went to play, I don't know, in moments like these, for example, I'm not going to play it like this. Let's say it's a meditational, right? It's a meditation. I'm not going to play it like this. I'm not going to play that because who's going to be singing along to that? You can hear the melody; it was very clear, but I tried to make it clear. But at the same time, that's not going to be helping anybody get into the moment or the mood of worship, or because you're just thinking, what are these chords? They don't make sense to me. And one thing that my dad always made sure I knew is that I'm always looking to cater to my audience, and if not that audience, this audience. For those of you who are listening, I'm pointing up to God. So it's important. I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe you wanted me to go into deeper analysis, but that is my starting point. Who am I catering to? Do I have the knowledge and the know-how to deliver what people need? It's really important that. So yeah.
Yeah, that answered my question beautifully. I guess kind of moving on then from the specifics of how you approach music and also the beginnings of your journey, what was the catalyst that kind of really propelled you more from a performance perspective and more of a worship perspective into playing in these bigger gigs, whether they be within the church or outside the church?
So I have three good friends, brothers more or less, called David Francis, Emmanuel Kumi, and Keith Pizzari. Basically, between those guys, we basically became like a group, and we started to play more or less all over the UK for services, weddings, expanded to other things. And then when I sort of went off to uni, because I hadn't really been doing much function work, but I had been working with artists and playing different things. But once again, I was very strict, not doing Fridays, not doing Sabbaths. He was very strict. So I missed out on quite a few opportunities, to be fair. But through that group, I was able to basically get around and do more around the UK. And when I went to uni, it became a different thing. I met more people and really started to build up a pool. I used to have a SoundCloud as well, a SoundCloud account that got deleted due to copyright infringement. But I started to do like arrangements and stuff like that for I will admit secular songs, and it was just something for me to just an outlet. But people listened to it. I had quite a lot of like thousands of streams on there actually for most of my songs. Um, but that got taken down. And once it got taken down, I just left it alone because it was a pet project in my mind. But a lot of people found me from that and said, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? You know? So, and that wasn't me just thinking I'm hiding my gift, or it was just a random outlet. I wouldn't spend much time on them, which might annoy people by me saying this, but I literally would do it in like maybe 2 hours or spend an evening on it, and then I'll just upload it. Wouldn't be any mixing or anything like that. I probably didn't know how to mix at the time, but it was me just finding my way through production, programming, getting the sounds that I want, and me just once again studying and just putting it out there. But from that, I was able to do a bit more and take some things in the world or in the church a bit more seriously, for my own personal development, really.
It's a very, very exciting journey, and I'm hearing similarities to my own life and that. I was gonna ask you from like that basis, and how did you manage to achieve the consistency of work, especially within the church? Because I find I have a lot of friends who are musicians, and having a successful career as a musician is probably one of the top 10 hardest things to do, especially in this day and age where it's not as renowned as it used to be. So for you, how did you manage to achieve kind of like that consistency and the workflow that you have musically?
Yeah, this is a difficult question. Because I got married very young. Well, relatively young. I got married at 23 and I had my first child at 24. So I had done some things, but I don't think I was able to do most things because I'm dedicated to my family. I'm very much a family man and I love my family. I love my wife and I love my children. Um, but work within the church, or you're talking work outside of church that sustains me, because there's a difference. Because sadly, the Adventist church, I'm sorry, this is going to be controversial, but I can probably count on one hand how many times the church has been able to say, Ainsley, here you go. Thank you so much for your ministry. This is something to bless you, or said, listen, Ainsley, here's even £200. Here you go. I was fortunate to have once again a few friends in Leeds that were happy to accept the fact that I didn't gig on Sabbath and do rehearsals and stuff like that, or gigs once again on Friday. And they were just like, no, Ainsley, we want you. So I was able to do a lot of work with them and be seen as well. Because that's part of being a musician. It's like you have to be seen for people to know that you're there and for people to use you, which is it's just a fact, really. It's not something anybody can avoid. Is that if you want to do something within church or outside of church, you have to be seen. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's ready to be seen. You have to, once again, as I've been saying from the start, study. So when it is time and it's time to you to do the work, you're ready. So and you're being seen for the good things that you're trying to do, by the way. So basically, I was doing a lot of functions. I was working with artists up and down the place, and also I had quite a few friends that I'd been writing with in Leeds as well, that I was gigging with and stuff like that. I was able to go to Italy, Gibraltar, um, France, loads of different places basically with these artists. So I was getting quite a bit of experience and stuff like that as well. Unfortunately, I had good friends in the industry that would bring me into gigs, even though I personally wasn't actively looking for these gigs. It was more so, hey Ainsley, come and do this. Um, and that's probably a downside on my part, is that I never pushed. And I'll probably publicly say this, to be fair. I never pushed because I didn't want to. This is damning. This is damning for me to say this. And you're getting the scoop here. But yeah, I didn't really want to be there. And it's horrible to say that because once again, I know that my gift is not for the world, it's for my God. And it's just to pivot to back my point. I wish the church could see the value in the musicians and the time. And I keep saying this, the studying, the research that we go through to hone our gifts. Not everybody can do what I do. And nor can I do what everybody else does. But you're paying for that person's time, even the gear and the equipment that people bring. What do you think it comes from charity shops? Do you think it comes out of the air? You know, it's crazy how things have. how things go in the church sometimes. But as I said, to maybe go back to your point, it's that I played with a lot of people. Maybe that helps. I don't know.
Okay, amazing. We're gonna bring the focus a little bit back to the music ministry itself, and I wanted to ask how your experience in the music ministry has changed your faith. I'm particularly curious because you keep mentioning that. Actually, let's even go back to it. You mentioned that your friends were asking you to come and play things that you weren't really looking for. Was that because you weren't necessarily looking for that type of career in music at that point in time, or
I would prefer to be playing praise and worship, or creating songs that glorify the Lord's name, instead of doing other things. So yeah.
okay. Speaking of being in service to the church and kind of following on that vein, one of the most common questions I hear from budding musicians is how the process works when it comes to youth days and MDing and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask you,
You want
um,
or not?
there's lots of questions about that and kind of like the rehearsal process and just how it works. I think there's a lot of intrigue and people kind of see you go up and play and they're not quite sure how it's coordinated and how you get there. So I was gonna ask like what are the steps that you take if someone approaches you with a youth day and kind of the follow-up for that as well.
Right. Oh, Del, you shouldn't ask me these questions, because I'm too honest. I think the one thing I will say is that I hope people who call or pastors are also listening to this. This is not, I'm not sending for you, but obviously not everybody understands the fact that musicians have to go away and rehearse things. They have to go and learn things. It's not a case that every musician in the world can play in all keys. Obviously I can, but I'm saying not all the volunteers and people that we call are professional musicians. So you have to give the volunteers that we are working with time to do certain things. Um, so it's a different world to obviously even from that being in the professional world, because everybody knows their stuff. Professional world, it's not the case of I'll give you 2 weeks to learn. Sometimes stuff lands in my lap. 20 song list, 20 set song list is coming to me. 3 days before. Hey, Ainsley, learn this. I have to read. I have to do this, and I can't have certain things change on me in the moment. Oh, Ainsley, yeah, you can do that, blah, blah, blah. I can do it, but not everybody else can. So sorry, let me go back to the start. But at least you got the synopsis of where I'm going with this. So normally, obviously, you get asked by youth days, for example, the youth leader. Normally that person would approach somebody, and normally it's one person that normally approach, or maybe a group of people who they've worked with. Oh, I'm going to just share that very quickly because this is a bit peak. But sometimes people have this gripe of why is it that only those people are up there? Why is it only those people that do X, Y, Z? Well, the reason is because we know that those people do the work. And once again, I'll go back to my favorite text, 2 Timothy 2 verse 15, study to show thyself approved, a workman that not needed to be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. Because once again, those people have put in the work. And when it's come to crunch time, they've done it. Now, sometimes the culture is a bit wrong here. And my friend Akil Henry would probably love this conversation right now, because not everybody is happy to bring people along and give people chances. Now, me, I'm definitely that person, as you already know. I want to expand the pool and make sure it's not just drums, keys, and whatever being put up on there. I want to make sure that we know that the gifts that God has given us is for everybody. So anyway, as I said, people are called by the youth ministry, youth directors, or maybe people that are in their group, and from there you've got the clock ticking. And sadly, we don't have like a rehearsal space. We're solely at the mercy of churches. And if you're happy for me to use XYZ space at this sort of time, so that can be a challenge in itself. But most churches are accommodating. I'm going to say shout out to Windsor Street for the past NEC Youth Day because they really helped. So And then after that, we have to make sure that the equipment that's there at the church is suitable to be used. Something that we're going to have to try and get something that's similar enough, because once again, our churches aren't equipped for, a lot of people will say performance, which people think is, church is not a performance, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I'm sure back in the day, they didn't have lights at church, so they needed to get lights. I'm sure at some point they needed to get a mic at church because people couldn't hear themselves. So it's simply stuff like that that we need to make sure that we have at churches, so things can flourish and things can get better as things go on. So sometimes that can be a building block. And I've had times where I've had to bring my entire PA out, subs, tops, in-ear mixes and mixers and stuff like that to sessions and places like that, because we don't have things around in places. But trying to cut this short, because I know I've been talking a long time. I see you scratching your head. so after that, obviously, I personally like to speak with the person I'm asking to do praise and worship if they haven't been asked already. And I like to make sure we have a clear theme from the youth advisory or the team or the youth director themselves, and we will basically go into prayer and supplication and study over the theme, and we're then trying to curate what songs are appropriate and how this, people might see this manipulation, but we want to make sure that people are getting the message for this moment at this time. So then it crosses over to scripture reading. Let's say, for example, we had the song "Here I Am to Worship." The scripture reading will then basically focus on worship, and that makes more sense, right? So things can go hand in hand. It's not just randomly we sang "Bringing in the Sheaves" and then we're talking about worship the next second. We can make some parallels to it, but how can we make it more direct for people who aren't thinking about music, and maybe people that only think about the top line or the lyrics that people sing, And that also goes down to other fundamentals and features of music, such as tempo, duration, BPM, the style, the texture as well, dynamics. These are things that you have to think about in terms when you're creating a set, and also thinking about the peaks and the troughs of a set, because you want to make sure you're preparing people's hearts for what they need to get basically in the service, or what God is asking, or what God is trying to give them, in a sense. We are not God. We're just trying to, once again, that's why I said prayer and supplication, because we have to do that study to make sure things can happen for his glory. So once that happens, obviously we'll have our rehearsals. You probably disagree because you've been at rehearsals, but I tried to have many rehearsals as possible. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. Once again, we're at the mercy of churches, and also we're mercy of volunteers. Not everybody can be dedicated. Not everybody can take time off to do rehearsals. And also when it's a bigger event like an NEC Youth Day or BUC Youth Day, we've got people coming from the UK, travel. Who's paying for this stuff? We're not getting paid anyway, and for me, this is a really loaded question. That's why it's a really long answer. Because for me, there'll be things I needed to do, such as programming, sending out set lists, and making sure people have the links or playlists or whatever it is to get what they need. Or also, hotel information if people need that, travel arrangements, blah, 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 food and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that falls on me as the MD as well. And also sometimes I prefer not to play, because I like to leave spots open for, once again, people who I can pour into. The last person was Nathan from Bradford. I love his playing anyway, but I was happy that he was able to see a pathway once again to the stage that we're talking about. And it's not for the stage, it's so he can use his gift for God, and sort of encourage him to do more. So there's a lot of things to think about, such as that. And obviously when it gets to the day, speaking with well, not on the day, but also speaking with production, because it's not the case of we get there and, oh, can you just plug me in? Plug me into what? We need to make sure we understand that side of things, such as production, DIs, how many channels are going from us to monitoring, and then monitoring to the front of house. Not everybody understands that, actually, which is really strange to me sometimes, that when I had, even at NEC Youth Day, somebody came up to me, said, the drums are too loud. All I can hear is drums and bass. And it's like, why are you coming to me? Why you can't come to me and say that because the guy at the back is controlling that. It's not nothing to do with us. Literally, that person that's at the back doing the front of house. Sorry, just to say that again. Front of house is the person that's doing all of the sound that the congregation hear. When you go to monitors, who are normally pretty close to or at stage left or stage right, close to the musicians who are on stage, they are doing the monitoring for what's on stage. So the sound that you hear on stage is completely different to what you hear if you're sat in the congregation. So all of these things I need to speak to, and I need to make sure that everybody has an understanding of how they're going to be heard, how people hear them, and going forward. So that's why it's not just simple as, oh, I can play. You know, you need to have that sort of insight to all these different facets. And if you don't, to be fair, the smarter people will make sure, okay, I need to get somebody who's technically savvy to speak to that person, you know, or I need to get somebody who can play to do that, or blah blah blah. But not everybody can do that because, oh gosh, you shouldn't be asking me these things, because for some reason, sadly, we don't have that sort of training in our church. And once again, I was fortunate because I got a good start from my church at Nottingham Central, but not everybody has that. But yeah, that's, I don't know, a small little inkling of how it goes. And also loads of meetings, whether it's with the musicians, the singers, or with the wider team, that's such as the advisory or the exec team. I like to be very involved in all the meetings. So once again, if they've got an idea or vision, we can say, oh, music can help with that, you know. And it's not always just singing a song or filler. You know, it's like, okay, how can we affect? Because I like to think that we can actually, you know, we can be sound effects. We can affect a moment and make it feel powerful if we want to, you know, on those sort of days. And if you've been to BUC Youth Day and also NEC Youth Day, you would have seen that, whether it's with sound effects um, or certain moments with the play that we had last year and stuff like that. So yeah, I apologize for speaking for so long.
Nah, it's very insightful to hear. For me personally, as a musician, I'm sure people find that insightful too as well. I actually wanted to veer off onto a tangent of something you mentioned before, because you've mentioned or alluded to some gaps and areas of development within the church in regards to how much knowledge we have when approaching these things and educating the current and upcoming generations in the area, but also then the support for these things in terms of the fact that as musicians, you know, we do need to eat and live. And some of us do have families to support and stuff like this. So I was gonna ask you, I guess firstly from your perspective, how do you still, and as much as you are playing for God, how do you still approach these gigs knowing that there isn't kind of like that basis behind it financially? Is that something that is a struggle to comprehend? Because I'm as a student, for me personally, when I'm going to things, I love playing, but I
Mm.
have to get there, you know, and I have to live. And so, and as much as I love playing and I love God, there's always this kind of like financial thing on in my mind as well, that, and as much as I believe God will provide, it's still very realistic. And we could dismiss it and say, oh, well, you know, the Lord will bless you. But as simple as that is, it's also not as simplistic as that, if that makes sense. So I
Yeah.
was wondering what your perspective was there.
No, I used to find it funny that people would say, yeah, the Lord will provide. And they've asked you to come and do it. They've come and asked you to do it, and they're saying the Lord will provide. You can provide. Imagine, I remember playing at like fundraising concerts and stuff like that. Like, I'm not trying, this doesn't sound big headed or anything like that, but without the gear that I brought, the music that I brought, or blah, 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 and, you know, the things that have been played, said, and done, you know, this wouldn't be what it would be. And if you're going to say, well, you know, you coming here as part of the fundraising, I never agreed to that. This might sound funny and just sound really bad, but you have to start looking, we have to start looking after our musicians. As I said, not everybody may seem like they deserve it or may seem grateful, but you literally don't know that person's sacrifice to get to that venue. And sometimes the relationship that we have with each other is that poor that we don't understand any of that. Obviously, Adele, we've been working together now for the past not even a year now, actually, think about it. You know, and but look how much I know you now. you know, and I'm really grateful for that because I think you're an amazing person. I think you're a godsend in my life personally, and that's the thing I like to do. Well, as I said, I like to pour into people, but I also want to get to know people. So once again, we don't do that enough for some reason. And when people are mashed down or people are upset or vexed and blah, 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 you never know what they might have needed. And sometimes it's not always financial. Sorry, I know the question is about financial, but sometimes it needed to be a prayer. Sometimes it needed to be a shoulder to lean on and just, oh, what's going on? Sometimes it needed to be a keyboard that needs to be borrowed or something like that. But just going back down to the crux of it again is that financially, for me, the way I prepare myself now is it's a bit different for me because I now will say, listen, travel immediately. If you cannot give me travel, it's more than likely I won't be able to come. Now, there's some people that I will still do that for. I'll come simply because I know that what you're doing is good. I know what you're trying to do. I know your heart because they've gotten to know me. So that's what I was saying. What I was saying at the start. If I know what you're trying to do is right, and you've got a good heart, and there's clear impact to what you're doing, of course I'm happy to join you on your crusade. Of course, I'm happy to do that. But if you're gonna just turn around and say, you know, like I like giving examples, but once again, I'm too honest. It's not I'm trying to out people, but I can give you so many examples where people have not paid, people have said they were going to pay, and also people trying to find biblical reasons as to why we shouldn't give any money to any musician. And I think that's ridiculous. I think the least that you can do for any musician is make sure that they're fed, they're watered, and their travel expenses are sorted. You know, because it goes further than that as well. That same car that they came in, who paid the tax for that car? That same car, that same tax. How about the insurance for that car? There's so many, and we haven't even spoken about the instruments themselves. If the instrument that I'm bringing is broken, and you at the church don't have an instrument that's actually sufficient to get the job done, or you haven't even looked after it yourself, where is it coming from? There's so many different things, that for some reason it all doesn't work out. And as I said, I do think at a minimum we should be making sure that musicians are fed, watered, and all the expenses are paid. Now, in terms of a monetary contribution, of course, we can go into the whole conversation in Leviticus where the Levites were paid for, and they were paid for service, and of course they will sort themselves out with tithe and all these different things. We can go into that conversation if we wanted to, but for some reason, I don't understand why we as a church or local churches, we will stand there and say, the Lord will bless you, but you can bless us. You can bless us because the Lord has blessed you. And I find that really strange. So that's why when I work with people, I make sure that that's the minimum that they get is, once again, food, water, expenses is really important. But for me, I have to be bit more choosy because, as I said earlier, I've got a family, I have a wife. The time, we already spoke about rehearsals and stuff like that. Every time I say yes to setting up a rehearsal, I've lost money in my mind. I've lost money because there's another gig or there's another project that I could be working on in that time. Now, don't get me wrong. In fact, in this season of doing NEC Youth Day, this is probably me putting my business out there. I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I've lost a lot of money. But I don't mind. I didn't mind because I know that my focus was not on self; it was with God. And it's not somebody else needed to tell me as well that the Lord will bless me. I looked to God and said, Lord, bless me. Because I know what I have is not for myself. You gave me this, Lord. I'm giving it back to you and asking that you will press it down, shake it together, run it over, and return what you've given, and bless what you've given.
I guess the follow up to that would be, is there, or can you see what causes the gap in between the support from the church? Not in just like oh, pay us kind of way, but just in any level of support. Is there like an area where you can see that's creating that rift potentially?
I think there's two things that come to my mind. The first one was ignorance. People not understanding what musicians go through to make things happen. And as I said, I think there's still pastors, leaders, ministers who are in power, let's say, that unfortunately don't understand everything that they've gone through. And the thing is, some of the walks are very similar. The same way that you had to study Greek, other bits of theology and stuff like that, we're doing the same thing, but on our instrument. Now, the sad thing, even though I'm saying ignorance, it's just the fact that not everybody, going back to my favorite text again, 2 Timothy 2 verse 15, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. You know, not everybody does that. And I know there's preachers that won't call certain people, or ministers that won't call certain people, once again, because they've let them down. They've been tardy. Sorry, not tardy. Sorry. They've been, you know what tardy means. That's such an American term. But, you know, they've been late. They've not learned the material. They're not getting on with people. There's this issue. There's that issue. There's so many different things. And because of that as well, and the reputation that some people have put on musicians, it's caused those rifts. So as I said, for me there's a bit of ignorance, and there's a bit of foul play, and there's also this third thing which might rub people up the wrong way, but different. I might feel like I'm attacking ministers here, but it's not just ministers, but people will want a certain vision for their program. They may not understand exactly what they want. They're just like, I've seen this, I've seen that. Can you get that done? And some people may promise them like, yeah, I can get that done. Some people will be like, I have no idea. Some people will be like, yes, I can do it, and they just can't. And it is difficult because, once again, we were not able to. Sorry, let me say it this way, because I was saying it to somebody the other day, is that we have Newbold, we have Stanborough School, we have Loma Linda, there's Oakwood, there's all these different places where ministers, Bible workers can go, even Peace and stuff like that. Obviously, Peace sadly isn't around anymore, but there's all these different organizations and establishments to train ministers and people of the, Bible workers and stuff like that. But there's nothing. There's sadly nothing to set standard and to educate musicians within the Adventist church. And I don't think there's really much anywhere else as well. But it's sad because there's been people that have started stuff that I benefited from. So, for example, when Diana Sinclair was here, years ago, I don't know if you know Diana Sinclair, but she had music weekends for young people. People go away and they'll work on stuff. They'll be introduced to an instrument. And go from there. I don't think I actually met to many of those, but I know a lot of people benefited from those, and they were given sort of the charge to service within that level. Within that, also, Antotina Brooks, who had the Can Academy down at Stanborough Park. Did you do Can? See, you did Can. We are Can. I'll get done for copyright. No, I'm joking. But there's stuff like that. Where is that? Where is that? And it's like, we need more of that. We need more of that. So there isn't this parity when people are expecting one thing, because people can't deliver because they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have the equipment as well to be able to do what they're doing. But I think my number one thing would probably be ignorance on the part of those who don't understand the walk of the musician.
Okay. I guess following on from that as well, because then probably my last question, because you were speaking about on the same vein as the ignorance, also the lack of education around the area. So it's probably a two-part question, and you might have answered it already. But for upcoming musicians, what are spaces which you can recommend where they can find this knowledge? And I guess for the church, kind of what can they do in the immediacy of, let's say, tomorrow, to begin to build those spaces to facilitate the education and the equipment of young people to be able to use our gifts to the full extent that they can be used?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, actually, because it has to start within somebody to have the drive and have the, once again, study. It has to start with somebody. Sorry, and there's ingredients as well that I had that I know that needs to be around. There needs to be a church family. There needs to be a family in general that's driving things around things getting done. But where can people go to to better themselves or to study? If I'm honest, YouTube. YouTube is a great tool to get started and learn more. The problem is though, with YouTube and all these different things that you could do, once again, different classes and workshops, is the application side of things. So what I mean by that is that for me, growing up, I knew after AYS there was going to be a jam. It was always called a jam, but what will happen is that you'd see the mic's been passed around, somebody will be singing a song, and no one's been told, oh, it's in that key, oh, we're doing this arrangement, blah, blah, blah. People are just singing. And your job is to play. There could be solos, there could be all this different stuff. We were very adventurous back in Nottingham Central. And, people had their favorites as well. But it's spaces like that where people can freely express themselves, that we're depriving young people, especially. And I think all ages of really. And people are yearning for that, maybe in the wrong time. Sometimes people are like, I wish praise and worship was like this, blah, blah, blah. But there's other times for that to happen. But as I said, application. I've learned one thing and I really want to play it. And there was one time I had a chord that I learned. It wasn't anything special. I think it was like a dominant 13 or something like this. So like in context, it would be something like this. So it's like that dominant 13 chord. Actually, I'll explain it a little bit because maybe it needs to be addressed. So what I was playing before finding out this chord was this. So the song was "Oh Taste and See That the Lord is Good and His Mercy endures forever," right? So what I was playing before was this. But after finding out this one chord, I then decided to throw this everywhere. In every single song that I'd find, I'd just be throwing this chord. And even if it didn't make sense to me, I'll just be doing this. So sorry. So that was still the same, like sorry, the dominant 13 chord. But I'll just be playing it everywhere, even if it didn't have any purpose. But if I didn't have like the jams and stuff like that to sort of give that, just basically try it out in different settings and see how it works, not only on my own, but also within the ensemble, and also listening to singers and their harmonies and stuff like that and see where it fit, I would never have known. I would never have known. So those times at Nottingham Central, for anybody that's listening from Nottingham Central, or anybody affiliated, those moments meant a lot to me because I would never have known so many things. I would never been able to try and express myself. But sadly, we don't have that. Sadly, it's more like, get out the church, or what are you doing here? You shouldn't be rehearsing and blah, blah, blah. Even rehearsals, you know, I think those have gone out the window for some reason. It's only, we can only do it on Sabbath, or you're supposed to get up or find your own time. These are the moments of expression that we're missing within the church. And then outside of that, I'm really grateful for ministries such as like His House, worship, house worship and stuff like that. One Sound, and even Psalms 150 as well, because they're still trying to give people spaces for people to do stuff and actually be creative. And guess what? They're only trying to do it for the Lord's glory. They're not trying to do it for self. They're just doing it for God. So if we can do that, but I wish the church would employ people like your sister, employ people like myself, or Keel, or Keith Bazzari, or David Francis Senior, or David Francis Jr. To be fair, I could list loads of people's names, but just to go around even churches and maybe do like a workshop for AYS, and if anything, fund some of the instruments and say, hey, listen, Shona, here's like 8 violins, or here's a quartet or something like that. and we want you to go, whether it's on Sabbath or Sunday, or it can be a weekend thing, and we want you to, create a program, design a program where you can give an introductory or you can make something happen, and with things like that happening, you'll see music transform the entirety of the UK, I think, and Adventist music as a whole. Um, my point is that I think we just need more. We need more opportunities for jams, so more opportunities for people to apply. So they've already tried out those things before they've even got to the chance to do a youth day, whether it's at their local church, before they even go to NEC or BUC or Scottish Mission or Welsh Mission. They've had the opportunities to showcase and, you know, try things in a safe environment. And that's one of probably the main thing I'd probably end on, is that we need to create safe environments. And don't get me wrong, in some of the jams that I had people come up and say this and that. What are you doing? That's not right, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, there's things that I don't know. I'm doing this, what I'm playing right now is in here. A lot of the jams I was doing, it wasn't out uni, it wasn't, I'm taking influences from the world and playing them here. I didn't know. I didn't know. I don't know if I can tell this story on here. You can cut this if you want. I think I might have told you a while ago, but someone called me a devil child growing up. This might be too much for Adventist Radio London. And I was 12, 11 or 12. And it was after a jam. It was during a jam. And somebody went to, they didn't say it to me directly. They went to, oh gosh, they went to a family member of mine. If I say too much, the person will know who it is. And they literally said, "Yeah, your son, devil child, and he's playing with the work of the devil and stuff like that." And it's like, because he reminds me, he's taking me back to the club and stuff like that. I'm 12. I've never stepped foot in the club ever.
Mm,
I've never stepped foot in the club. I don't know what it's even like,
mm,
and all I'm doing is trying to try things. And it's if people have got through to me, imagine she came and said that to me directly at 12 years old. I
mm.
don't think I'll be playing. There's been so many blockades for musicians, and I know I'm just one of them. But what I need people to do for me, can I say this? I'm going to say, for those of you that can mentor a musician, please do. Please do. Even if it's just a little thing of checking up on them, giving them little bits of homework. Oh, go learn this song for me. It means a lot. It means the world to a young musician coming up. Even older musicians that are starting up. Hey, go learn this. I'd love to hear you play this. That sort of talk. That means the world. And setting people goals and then giving them opportunities, whether it's in church. Oh man, it means the world. It means the world. And I really think that people need to start doing that a bit more. Is really just making sure that you're cultivating the gift or the gifts that are around you one way or another. Um, so that's really what I'm trying to say in terms of how we can do this. Once again, yes, the conference could help, or the local churches can help, local businesses could help. Um, but maybe even I'm saying this to myself, we need to stand up and show that we can do it, and start asking questions instead of waiting for things to happen.
Some incredibly insightful words from Ainsley Johns challenging us as Adventists. You can find him on socials at ALJ_music, and you can find us on socials at _youth perspective. Next week we'll be back with more topics, more fun and more youth, delving more into our lives and matters that are affecting us. But that's all for tonight. You were listening to Youth Perspective on Adventist Radio London, and I was Adele, your host. Take care and good night.